I'm Narendra Kumar and we are from NRK Academy. And today I have come to you to present a very beautiful, very touching story about a young boy. And the story's name is The Homecoming, and the author is the renowned Rabindranath Tagore of India. So Rabindranath Tagore was born in 1861, he lived up till 1941, and he wrote some very beautiful plays, stories, novels, essays. He was a political activist, he was an educationist, he was a painter, he was a musician. So he was an amazing artist, a whole artist. And this short story I have selected because this is one of the most touching short stories, and it covers so many issues about growing up, about need. I will not like to come between you and Rabindranath Tagore, and we'll start the story right away. The Homecoming. The name of the story is The Homecoming. Phatik Chakravorti, that's the name, was ringleader among the boys of the village. A new mischief got into his head. There was a heavy log lying on the mud flat of the river, waiting to be shaped into a mast for a boat. He decided that they should all work together to shift the log by main force from its place and roll it away. So he wanted to do that naughty thing. The owner of the log would be angry and surprised, and they would all enjoy the fun. Everyone seconded the proposal, and it was carried out unanimously. But just as the fun was about to begin, Makhan, M-A-K-H-A-N, Makhan, Phatik's younger brother, sauntered up, S-A-U-N-T-E-R-E-D, sauntered up and sat down on the log in front of them all without a word. So he just sat there. The boys were puzzled for a moment. He was pushed rather timidly by one of the boys and told to get up, but he remained quite unconcerned. Phatik. He appeared like a young philosopher, meditating on the futility of games. Phatik was furious. "Makhan," he cried, "if you don't get down this minute, I'll thrash you." Makhan only moved to a more comfortable position. Now, if Phatik was to keep his regal dignity before the public, it was clear he ought to carry out his threat. But his courage failed him at the crisis. His fertile brain, however, rapidly seized upon a new maneuver which would discomfit his brother and afford his followers an added amusement. So he got an idea. He gave the word of command to roll the log, and Makhan stick on. But he overlooked the fact, like those who attempt earthly fame in other matters, that there was peril in it, there's danger in it. The boys began to heave at the log with all their might, calling out, "1, 2, 3, go!" At the word go, the log went, and with it went Makhan's philosophy, glory, and all. All the other boys shouted themselves hoarse with delight. They were so delighted Makhan had fallen to the river. But Phatik was a little frightened. He knew what was coming, and sure enough, Makhan rose from Mother Earth, blind as fate and screaming like the Furies. He rushed at Phatik and scratched his face and bit him and kicked him, and then went crying home. The first act of the drama was over. Phatik wiped his face and sat down on the edge of a sunken barge on the riverbank and began to chew a piece of grass. A boat came up to the landing, and a middle-aged man with grey hair and dark moustache stepped on shore. He saw the boy sitting there doing nothing and asked him where the Chakravortis lived. Phatik went on chewing the grass and said, "Over there," but it was quite impossible to tell where he pointed. The stranger asked him again. He swung his legs to and fro on the side of the barge and said, "Go and find out," and continued to chew the grass as before. So a very naughty teenager. But now a servant came down from the house and told Phatik his mother wanted him. Phatik refused to move, but the servant was a master on this occasion. He took Phatik up roughly and carried him kicking and struggling in impotent rage. When Phatik came into the house, his mother saw him. She called out angrily, "So you have been hitting Makhan again?" Phatik answered indignantly, "No, I haven't. Who told you that?" His mother shouted, don't tell lies, you have. Phatik said suddenly, I tell you I haven't, you ask Makhan. But Makhan thought it best to stick to his previous statement. He said, yes mother, Phatik did hit me. Phatik's patience was already exhausted. He could not bear the injustice. He rushed at Makhan and hammered him with blows. Take that, he cried, and that for telling lies. His mother took Makhan's side in a moment and pulled Phatik away, beating him with her hands. When Phatik pushed her aside, she shouted out, what, you little villain? Would you hit your own mother? It was just at this critical juncture that the grey-haired stranger arrived, the stranger who had come in the river. He asked what was the matter. Phatik looked sheepish and ashamed. But when his mother stepped back and looked at the stranger, her anger was changed to surprise, for she recognized her brother and cried, why Dada? Dada in Bengali, the language of India, one of the languages of India, means brother. Why Dada? Where have you come from? As she said these words, she bowed to the ground and touched his feet, as was the custom. Her brother had gone away soon after she had married, and he had started business in Bombay. His sister had lost her husband while he was in Bombay. Bishambar had now come back to Calcutta and had at once made enquiries about his sister, and he had then hastened to see her as soon as he found out where she was. The next few days were full of rejoicing. The brother asked after the education of the two boys. He was told by his sister that Phatik was a perpetual menace. So Phatik was not studying at all. He was lazy, disobedient and wild. So Phatik was lazy, disobedient and wild. But Makhan was as good as gold, as quiet as a lamb and very fond of reading. Bishambar kindly offered to take Phatik off his sister's hands and educate him with his own children in Calcutta. The widowed mother readily agreed. When his uncle asked Phatik if he would like to go to Calcutta with him, his joy knew no bounds. Now Phatik, for him, going to the city was an amazing thing. And he said, oh yes, uncle, in a way that it made it quite clear that he meant it. It was an immense relief to the mother to get rid of Phatik. She had a prejudice against the boy, and no love was lost between the two brothers. She was in daily fear that he would either drown Makhan someday in the river or break his head in a fight or run him into some danger or the other. She was very frightened of this wild guy, Phatik. At the same time, she was somewhat distressed to see Phatik's extreme eagerness to get away. Phatik, as soon as all was settled, kept asking his uncle every minute when they were to start. He was on pins and needles all day long with excitement and lay awake most of the night. He bequeathed to Makhan in perpetuity, forever, his fishing rod, his big kite and his marbles. Indeed, all this time of departure, his generosity towards Makhan was unbounded. So he was very generous. He was so happy he was going to Calcutta. When they reached Calcutta, Phatik made the acquaintance of his aunt for the first time. She was by no means pleased with this unnecessary addition to her family. So she was not that happy. One more guy has come to the family. She was very unhappy. She found her own 3 boys quite enough to manage without taking anyone else. And to bring a village lad of 14 into their midst was terribly upsetting. Bishambar should have really thought twice before committing such an indiscretion. Now this comes a very beautiful passage. In this world of human affairs, there is no worse nuisance than a boy at the age of 14. He is neither ornamental nor useful. It is impossible to shower affection on him as on a little boy, and he is always getting in the way. If he talks with a childish lisp, he is called a baby. And if he answers in a grown-up way, he is called impertinent. In fact, any talk at all from him is resented. Then he is at the unattractive, growing age. He grows out of his clothes with indecent haste. His voice grows hoarse and breaks and quavers. His face grows suddenly angular and unsightly. It is easy to excuse the shortcomings of early childhood, but it is hard to tolerate even unavoidable lapses in a boy of 14. So Tagore has written so well about the difficulties of being at 14, a teenager. The lad himself becomes painfully self-conscious. So at 14 you become conscious, am I good, am I right? When he talks with elderly people, he's either unduly forward or else so unduly shy that he appears ashamed of his very existence. Yet, it is at this very age, this is an important point, when in his heart of hearts, a young lad most craves for recognition and love. This is the age when he wants recognition for love, and he becomes a devoted slave of anyone who shows him consideration. But none dare openly love him, for that would be regarded as undue indulgence and therefore bad for the boy. So, what with scolding and chiding, he became very much like a stray dog that has lost his master. So, he's not getting any love there. For a boy of 14, his own home is the only paradise. To live in a strange house with strange people is little short of torture, while the height of bliss is to receive the kind looks of women and never to be slighted by them. It was anguish to Phatik to be the unwelcome guest in his aunt's house, despised by this elderly woman and slighted, which means criticized, on every occasion. If she ever asked him to do anything for her, he would be so overjoyed that he would overdo it, and then she would tell him not to be so stupid, but to get on with his lessons. The cramped atmosphere of neglect in his aunt's house oppressed Phatik so much that he felt that he could hardly breathe. He could not breathe. He wanted to go out into the open country and fill his lungs and breathe freely, but there was no open country to go to. Surrounded on all sides by Calcutta houses and walls, he would dream night after night of his village home and longed to be back there. He remembered the glorious meadow where he used to fly his kite all day long, the broad river banks where he would wander about the live long day, singing and shouting for joy, the narrow brook, the small river where he could go and dive and swim at any time he liked. He thought of his band of boy companions over whom he was despot, was king, and above all the memory of that mother of his who had such a prejudice against him occupied him day and night. So day and night he was remembering his village. All that river, the lake, the swimming, the freedom, mother, even the mother, and a kind of physical love like that of animals, a longing to be in the presence of the one who is loved, an inexpressible wistfulness. Wistfulness is longing. During absence, a silent cry of the inmost heart for the mother. He's missing his mother. Like the blowing of a calf in the twilight. This love, which was almost an animal instinct, agitated the shy, nervous, lean, uncouth and ugly boy. No one could understand it, but it preyed upon his mind continually. So constantly he was thinking about his mother, the river, and he was missing his mother tremendously. There was no more backward boy in the whole school, and the problem was school also. He was not a good student. There was no more backward boy in the whole school than Phatik. He gaped and remained silent when the teacher asked him a question, and like an overladen ass, patiently suffered all the blows that came down on his back. He was beaten there in the school. When other boys were out at play, he stood wistfully by the window and gazed at the roofs of the distant houses. And if by chance he saw children playing on the open terrace of any roof, his heart would ache with longing. He wanted to play he wanted to have the whole feeling of the village and the river. One day he summoned up his courage and asked his uncle, "Uncle, when can I go home?" His uncle answered, "Wait till the holidays come." But the holidays would not come till November, and there was a long time still to wait. One day, Phatik lost his lesson book. Even with the help of books, he had found it very difficult, indeed, to prepare his lesson. Now it was impossible. Day after day, the teacher would cane him unmercifully. His condition became so abjectly miserable that even his cousins were ashamed to own him. They began to jeer and insult him more than the other boys. "What is this cousin, horrible guy?" They used to say. He went to his aunt at last and told her that he had lost his book. His aunt pursed her lips in contempt and said, "You great, clumsy country lout! How can I afford with all my family to buy you new books 5 times a month?" That night on his way back from school, Phatik had a bad headache with a fit of shivering. He felt he was going to have an attack of malaria. His one great fear was that he would become a nuisance to his aunt. He didn't want to disturb his aunt. The next morning, Phatik was nowhere to be seen. All searches in the neighborhood proved futile. The rain had been pouring in torrents all night, and those who went out in search of the boy got drenched through to the skin. At last, this bomber asked help from the police. At the end of the day, a policeman stopped at the door before the house. It was still raining and the streets were all flooded. Two constables brought out Phatik in their arms and placed him before Bishambar. He was wet through from head to foot, muddy all over. His face and eyes flushed red with fever and his limbs all trembling. Bishambar carried him in his arms and took him into the inner apartments. When his wife saw him, she exclaimed, "What a heap of trouble this boy has given us. Hadn't you better send him home?" Phatik heard her words, "home," and sobbed out, "Uncle, I was just going home, but they dragged me back here." The fever rose very high, and all that night the boy was delirious. Bishambar brought in a doctor. Phatik opened his eyes, flushed with fever, and looked up to the ceiling and said vacantly, "Uncle, have the holidays come yet? May I go home?" He was remembering his village. Bishambar wiped the tears from his own eyes and took Phatik's lean and burning hands in his own and sat by him through the night. The boy began again to mutter. At last his voice became excited. "Mother," he cried, "don't beat me like that. Mother, I'm telling the truth." He was remembering all his days. The next day, Phatik became conscious for a short time. He turned his eyes about the room. As if expecting someone to come. At last, with an air of disappointment, his head sank back on the pillow. He turned his back to the wall with a deep sigh. He just gave up. He was waiting for his mother. Bishambar knew his thoughts and bending down his head whispered, "Phatik, I have sent for your mother." The day went by. The doctor said in a troubled voice that the boy's condition was very critical. Phatik began to cry out, "By the mark, 3 fathoms, by the mark, 4 fathoms, by the mark," playing with his boys. He had heard the sailor on the river steamer calling out the mark on the plumb line. So he was remembering all the boatmen. Now he was himself plumbing an unfathomable sea. Later in the day, Phatik's mother burst into the room like a whirlwind and began to toss from side to side and moan and cry in a loud voice. Bishambar tried to calm her agitation. She was totally crying, but she flung herself on the bed and said, "Phatik, my darling, my darling." She was crying, going agitated. Phatik stopped his restless movements for a moment. His hands ceased beating up and down. He said, Huh? He said. The mother cried again, "Phatik, my darling, my darling." Phatik very slowly turned his head and without seeing anybody, he didn't see anybody, said, "Mother, the holidays have come." And that is the end of the story. The holidays have come, which means he passed away, he died. So you can see in this story how, first of all, I think you must have all felt it. I'll just name it. That Rabindranath Tagore has completely brought out the emotions of a young boy of living boy. What is living for a boy? Not a man, not grown-up people. Grown-up people are already dead, so they're living out their life. They're just living dead. But a young boy, a teenager, especially like Phatik, a naughty boy, a wild boy, a boy who is living in, and without realizing, he went to Calcutta, no love, no friends, school where he was beaten every day. He lost his freedom. See, this short story is really not only about Phatik. It is about freedom. Every human being, there's a freedom beating in his heart. I can't imagine a greater story on child psychology than this. I don't know what more anybody can write on freedom of a child. This is one of the greatest stories on child psychology and freedom of a child. I hope you all enjoyed this story, and my name is Narendra Kumar and we are from NRK Academy, and we will meet once again with another story or a poem or a play. Thank you so much.